Okay, the live stream is all ready, and we still got a minute, but I'll go ahead and start the recording as well. So just when it rolls over in about 50 seconds.
We'll start then. Well, it's 5:30 on September 28, 2022. My name is Jim Brewer. I'm the hearings officer for the city of Salem. We have one hearing on our agenda tonight. It is VAR SPR ADJ 22-02, and the address is 5775 Commercial Street. I'm going to go quickly through the hearings procedure for tonight. It does not look like we have any neighborhood report or public testimony. It looks like the testimony will be from the applicant, and of course, staff will be here. So the order of tonight's proceedings will be a staff report to be presented by Aaron Penko. The applicant's presentation, let's limit that to 15 minutes. Ordinarily, a neighborhood report would be 10 minutes, but we don't have anybody signed up for that or for testimony in favor, in opposition, or neutral, which means the applicant will not get rebuttal. Although we may have questions back and forth depending on where we are with things at that point. When we are done with testimony, we'll close the public hearing, although the applicant could request continuance to provide additional documents or evidence. And if you're going to do that, Ms. Dalton, just do it during your testimony, please. People testifying may also request the record remain open for 7 additional days. So if you're going to do that during your testimony as well. I'll direct everyone's attention to the applicable criteria found in the notice. Testimony and evidence for the public hearing should be directed towards these criteria. For variance, Salem Revised Code SRC Chapter 245.005 sub D provides the criteria for variances and states an application for a variance shall be granted if all of the following criteria are met. 1, there is an unreasonable hardship or practical difficulty created by the physical characteristics of the land. And 2, the variance will not result in adverse effects that are unreasonably detrimental to the public health, safety, and welfare, or to property or improvements in the vicinity. Class 3 site plan review, Salem Revised Code, Chapter 220.005 F3. Is that right? Yeah. Provides the criteria for Class 3 site plan review and states an application for a Class 3 site plan review shall be granted if A, the application meets all the applicable standards of the UDC, B, the transportation system provides for the safe, orderly, and efficient circulation of traffic into and out of the proposed development, and negative impacts to the transportation system are mitigated adequately. C, parking areas and driveways are designed to facilitate safe and efficient movements of vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrians. And D, the proposed development will be adequately served with city water, sewer, storm water facilities, and other utilities appropriate to the nature of the development. We have an adjustment, SRC Chapter 250.005 sub D sub 2 provides the criteria for adjustment and states an application for a Class 2 adjustment shall be granted if all of the following criteria are met. A, the purpose underlying the specific development standard proposed for adjustment is Roman numeral 1, clearly inapplicable to the proposed development, or Roman numeral 2, equally or better met by the proposed development. B, if located within a residential zone, the proposed development will not detract from the livability or appearance of the residential area. C, if more than one adjustment's been requested, the cumulative effect of all the adjustments results in a project which is still consistent with the overall purposes of the zone. To remind people who are not testifying, as well as the applicant, failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the city or other parties the opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeals to the State Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue, and failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. So if you don't raise things now, you may not be able to later. I'm taking it that there are no objections on jurisdictional grounds and that, yep, this is the kind of thing that ought to be in front of the hearings officer. Not seeing any opposition. So this is case number VAR SPR ADJ 22-02 5775 Commercial Street Southeast. Hearing is open. Could we have the staff report, Mr. Panko?
You bet. Good evening. My name is Aaron Pinko with the Community Development Department. Let me share my screen here. And are you able to see this here?
I am. That's working great.
Great. So yeah, this is variance, class 3 site plan review, and class 2 adjustment, case number VAR SPR ADJ 2202. At this time, I'd like to enter into the record the staff report, including its attachments.
And it is so entered. Thank you.
And this is a vicinity map of the subject property. The property that's being developed is highlighted in the bold line. It has frontage along Wiltsey Road to the south. Wiltsey is designated as a collector street. The property itself is part of a larger development site. So there are a few other lots that are surrounding it that are developed that are part of the same development site as the site that's being developed. It also has frontage along Commercial Street to the east, which is designated as a major arterial. And this is a zoning map for the property. Normally you'll see colors on the map. The property at the time the application was submitted was zoned CR, retail commercial. In August of this year, the R Salem project approved a zone change for the site. So it changed the designation from CR, retail commercial, to MU3, mixed use 3. So that's what you see highlighted here on this map. The surrounding properties that are part of the development site, and the properties to the west and to the north share that same mixed use 3 designation. But we're applying the standards that the application at the time it was submitted, so the CR standards. And this is an aerial photo of the site. So to the west of the property, existing development, this is personal storage, self-storage. And then you'll see some of the existing buildings that are on the development site. This site is vacant. There's a creek, Wallen Creek, that flows through the property along the south side, and along the west side. And there's shared parking throughout this development site. In 2019, there was a subdivision application that was approved for the entire site. So it split the 7 acres into 5 lots. There was also an adjustment requested with the subdivision, and that adjustment reduced the setback requirement to those interior property lines. So we've already approved basically 0 setback throughout this development site here. As a condition of the approval for the site plan review application, we added a condition requiring that the subdivision plat be recorded prior to building permit approval. And then in 2020, there was an application that was approved for a conditional use permit. And it's for this mixed use building. So in the CR zone, multifamily residential is allowed with a conditional use permit. So the applicant has already obtained that approval to do the use. The conditional use permit included 5 conditions of approval. So for the application tonight, it does include the site plan review for actual development of the building. There's a few more adjustments, and then there's a variance requested to eliminate one of the conditions of approval from that conditional use permit. And here's some photos of the site. So this is from Commercial Street looking west. So you'll see there's an existing Taco Bell. It's part of the development site. The vacant area kind of in the background here is where the proposed building would be. And then this is a view taken from the development site itself. So going into the driveway off of Wiltsey Road and then looking west towards the site. And the creek would be kind of around this area here. Okay, so with the proposal does include development of a new mixed-use building. It contains ground floor commercial space and then 71 multifamily residential dwelling units. The applicant's requesting the variance to eliminate a condition of approval from the conditional use permit 2008, requiring the applicant to provide building offsets at least 4 feet in depth at 40-foot intervals along the building length. The applicant explains that the building does provide recessed private balconies for residential units on the upper floors. However, due to spatial needs of the proposed mixed-use building, a hardship is created in designing a building with the offsets at the intervals required by the condition. In addition, with the our Salem zone change last month for the property, the mixed-use building would not be subject to the building facade design standards that appeared as a condition of approval in the conditional use permit if you apply the new standards, the new zoning standards for the property. So if this condition was removed, the building would conform with those new zoning standards with respect to building offset and articulation. And because of the building's location and setback from Commercial Street and Wiltsey, and then due to the further buffering by Wallen Creek provided at the south and the west, the building will not have a great degree of visibility from surrounding areas, and no adverse effects to the public health, safety, or welfare are anticipated with the granting of the variance. The site plan review process ensures that any new development is in compliance with the development standards of the zoning code. In general, the standards include maximum building height, setbacks, off-street parking standards, landscaping, pedestrian access, and solid waste service area requirements. The applicant did request an adjustment to a few of those standards to increase the maximum building height and to some of the pedestrian connection standards. When reviewing the application, there were a few other issues that were identified with the proposed site plan that will need to be corrected prior to building permit approval. Those include the amount of weather protection provided along the ground floor facade. It doesn't quite meet the requirement as conditioned by conditional use permit 2008. The plans provided do not demonstrate that the solid waste service area is in conformance with all applicable standards. And additional information, again, will need to be provided prior to building permit approval. The number of existing and proposed off-street parking spaces for the shared development site appears to exceed the maximum allowance in Chapter 806. So the number of new parking spaces that can be added to the site may need to be reduced. The applicant will need to provide an updated site plan and complete parking analysis at the time of building permit, demonstrating that the development site is in compliance with maximum parking allowance and not exceeding those allowances. And then the applicant will need to demonstrate the bicycle parking requirements are met. And finally, there are some existing city easements along Wallen Creek. The applicant will need to obtain permits before placing any fill or parking within that easement area. So the two adjustments that were requested, the first one is to increase the maximum building height. So in the CR zone, the maximum building height is 50 feet. The proposed building exceeds that by less than an inch. So they're requesting the adjustment, and due to the location of the building, so it's set back from Commercial Street, it's set back from Wiltsey Road, and then further buffering from Wallen Creek. The slight increase in building height will not be noticeable. And then again, if you apply the standards for the current zoning, the MU3 zoning, buildings can be built to a height of 70 feet. So the building will be in compliance with those height standards in the future. The second adjustment is to eliminate the pedestrian access standard requiring new buildings to provide a connection to other buildings that are on the same development site. So to the north of the building here, we have an existing pedestrian network that's provided that connects these two buildings through the parking area to each other and out to Commercial Street. Staff believes that a pedestrian connection could be provided relatively easily in the areas that are highlighted. So we're recommending that the hearings officer find that those connections should be provided by the applicant, and the crossings across the vehicle use area should be developed to our standards for striping and protection. And then the other area where the applicant's requesting the adjustment is on the south side of the site between the mixed use building and the path that would lead towards that Taco Bell that's located at the southern end of the property here. The code in this case, because the ownership is slightly different between this parcel and this one, the code would require the pedestrian pathway to be provided to the property line. That property line would be roughly in the middle of this parking area. So to meet code, they would have to provide that, and it wouldn't take them directly to the entrance. Staff is recommending that the hearings officer approve the request to eliminate that connection and find that the alternative route here, so from the mixed use building through the sidewalk provided out to the public sidewalk, there would be a pathway, a safe pathway to take folks from the mixed use building along the public sidewalk and then through a crossing over here to the building entrance there. So yeah, we're recommending that the hearings officer grant this request. Testimony was received from the South Gateway Neighborhood Association, and the full comments were attached to the staff report. Cigna raised some concerns that granting the adjustments to remove the interior pedestrian connections could result in conflicts between pedestrians and motorists on the development site. And as explained, the applicant will be required to provide interior pedestrian pathways leading to the existing buildings on the north and the east, but will not be required to provide that partial connection to the Taco Bell building. We did also receive comments from the Salem Keizer Public Schools, which were included in the staff report, and then no other public comments were received. And staff is recommending that the hearings officer approve the variance, site plan review and adjustment subject to the recommended conditions of approval. Thank you.
So I've got a couple of questions, and the applicant will want to listen to these too, because we're kind of tied to those. I think I understand on the pedestrian connections, and particularly the one at the Taco Bell, that if we met the standard, that pedestrian connection would be somewhere in a parking area. That would be less direct and that would be less safe and less contiguous than going out to the public sidewalk and around to the existing connection. Is that kind of staff's view of that?
That's correct. The connection would only need to be made to the lot line here. It wouldn't have to be provided on this property here itself. So a full connection between the two building entrances won't be made. It's a partial connection that would go to the middle of a parking lot.
And that seems like that's just not a safe thing to do, really.
This seems like a more efficient route for people.
The one thing that does trouble me is the variance. And I'd be interested in staff's view of what we do with the hardship or practical difficulty being created by the physical characteristics of land. And this seems like, I think it's a very reasonable variance. It makes a lot of sense. But when I look at the criteria, I'm trying to wrap my head around how we get it to work with that.
This is a good question. I think we've had this discussion before too on other cases.
I think so.
The applicant in this case, they did receive conditional use approval that was subject to conditions. Now, if there's a change to those plans, there's a few paths forward for the applicant to make those changes. They can apply for a modification of the conditional use permit, but there's some criteria they would have to meet in order to qualify for the modification. And I think removing the condition here and having a proposal that would result in significant changes to the appearance of the building doesn't quite meet the modification criteria for the conditional use permit. So that eliminates that pathway there. The other route is the variance. So variances can be used to remove or alter conditions of approval from previous land use actions. So this is the right mechanism for it, but our criteria are limited. As you identified it, we have to find the physical characteristics of the land as part of our criteria. This is ultimately the applicant's burden to demonstrate that they're meeting the criteria. If it was staff, I mean, some of the things physically with the land we discussed are the distance from Commercial Street, the distance from Wiltsey Road. There is Wallen Creek that provides buffering. If you apply those conditions of the land to the purpose of what that condition was for originally with the building, to provide something that's interesting, built up to the public view, providing some articulation, it's not really applicable in this case when you apply the physical characteristics of the land. That's probably the best I can do on this.
Okay. Well, we're gonna thank you. That's helpful to me. Let's go ahead. I have a feeling the applicant might like to talk now. Would you like to make a presentation, Ms. Dalton?
I would. Thank you. Brandy Dalton with Multitech Engineering. I'm here tonight representing the applicant for the Commercial Street project. First of all, we've been working on this project for a long time with city staff. So they've been great with helping us kind of maneuver around some things and design this building to fit on this site so we can get this up and going. As Aaron said, we're looking for site plan review approval, adjustment approval, and variance approval tonight. Aaron showed how we meet the criteria, and we believe that we do meet all the criteria to warrant approval for the 71 unit mixed use development. Some things that I want to just make sure that are out there is we are asking for a variance to eliminate that condition. And that condition for offsets is linked to the multifamily design standards, which when I look at those design standards, those are more geared towards like craftsman style apartment building. What we're dealing with here is a mixed use modern design. And one reason for the long building, not many offsets, is because we're dealing with a property here that is surrounded by existing parking, existing circulation, and existing buildings. So Aaron probably knows through this process, because he's had to talk to me 100 times. This was not an easy fit to be able to find a building that went on this site that met the setbacks. Some of the practical difficulties that are created are the setbacks that are required because of the creek. There's easements we have to stay out of. We had to provide required parking for mixed use. And as I said before, the existing parking and buildings. So that made it difficult for us finding a building that we could put in there that met the applicant's needs, which is mixed use. So we have commercial uses on the bottom that they require specific space, which, as you know, most commercial are they're a box. There's no offsets.
Mhm.
They're squares. So because of those requirements as well, providing a building that had those offsets just was not feasible for us to do, and then along meet all the other code requirements. We did look at other options, and it just wasn't going to work for the site. As Aaron said, we have such huge setbacks from the creek, commercial street, that really there shouldn't be any, because of the lack of offsets, there shouldn't be any adverse impacts to adjacent properties. It's going to be a visually appealing building. There's going to be tons of landscaping. Some of the requirements that Aaron mentioned also, that we are going to go back and revise the plan and make sure they're done. We'll go back and make sure the whole facade is covered with the awnings, weather protection. We have no problem doing that. The pedestrian paths, we did ask for an adjustment for the elimination of the pedestrian path over to Taco Bell, because we have a direct sidewalk to Wiltsey, and so we didn't feel that was a safe option. But the other pedestrian paths that Aaron noted, we have no problem providing those. We'll make sure those are shown on the plan. What else? Aaron also mentioned that we exceed maximum parking, which I think once we go in and look at the trash enclosure, we are going to have to move that. So that's going to eliminate some of the required parking right there as well. So we have no problem with the conditions of approval. We know it needs to be revised based on my conversations with Aaron. And we feel that approving this mixed use development with housing and commercials is a positive benefit to the neighborhood. And we believe we meet all the criteria for the current zone, but also, I guess I shouldn't say that, the zone that we were looking at this under, and the current MU3 zone. So we would recommend or ask that it be reviewed for approval.
Okay. So in terms of the conditions of approval, I think that you just said, yeah, that was all seemed reasonable to you. It is feasible to meet the UDC requirements, as Aaron kind of walked through them earlier. It sounds like those are all feasible to meet as well.
Yes, that's correct. I've been working with Aaron on those for a while.
Okay. I think I understand your thoughts about the hardships being created by the physical nature of the property. I'm gonna think about that a little bit. I think I agree on the closing of the one pedestrian thing. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. I'll have a written decision out within 10 days. I think everything's going to get approved. That one criterion does have me a little flummoxed. I think it is a statement of common law variance that doesn't necessarily always work for us. I think in this case, I can figure out how I can see how, yeah, that's satisfied by this development. So this is going to get approved. Let me work through how we do that in that particular case. Unless there's something else, I think we close the hearing and we're done for this evening. Yeah. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.